It takes faith to reach out. It takes faith to reach out. Two people in the gospel reading that we will hear in a moment, in this gospel narrative today, come to Jesus, each with their own request, each in their own specific way, and with their own needs. Two people. Both come seeking healing, wellness, and new life. There's a crowd, we notice in this story. And notice in the story, when you hear it, the pressing in of the crowd, the squeezing as Jesus goes about his day. Have you experienced a pressing in, a squeezing? Have you been in a crowd where you've been shuffled along or pushed along, bumped and bruised, jostled? Have you felt safe? Have you felt nervous? Have you felt fearful? A man named Jairus, who was a synagogue leader in the day of Jesus, comes running and pushes through the crowd and makes his way to Jesus and pleads for his dying daughter for health. She's at home, she's in bed, she's sick, and maybe she won't even last the day. She's 12 years old. The other person who came to Jesus is a woman of no name, a nameless woman. And she interrupts Jesus as he's going on his way to the home of Jairus. Deep within this pressing crowd, she edges her way to Jesus, being bumped and pushed and squeezed and jostled and even rejected, until she's within arm's reach. And she reaches out and she touches his coat. She's been bleeding menstrually for 12 years. Touch is a song by an Australian pop group called Noiseworks, released in 1988. Remember it? From their album called Touch. Another day is going out. A sea of faces crying out. With all we have today, you think we'd stop and take a look now, yeah? And all I want to say is maybe that we should reach out and touch somebody. Reach out and reach out and reach out and touch somebody. Reach out and reach out and, they were into repetition in those days. Reach out and touch somebody. In this old world we can see, so let's take away the silent fears, yeah? With all of our mistakes, you'd think we'd stop and take a look now, yeah? And all I want to say is maybe we should reach out. Everybody. Reach out and reach out and reach out and touch somebody. Reach out and reach out and reach out and touch somebody. The writer of Psalm 130 also reaches out and cries, "Out of the depths of my heart I cry to you, O God. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. If you, Lord, kept a record of wrongs, Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits, and in God's word, I put my hope." It takes faith to reach out and touch somebody. Faith is the action. Faith is a decision of that action. You know, if you were up in a plane with a parachute on, I don't know, 30,000 feet or whatever it is, and you open the door and you've got to jump, does faith start in the action of jumping, or does faith start in the decision to jump? Diving off a bungee jumping cord or a pool diving board, you've got to have a decision first. Faith is already at play before the action. Remember Moses at the burning bush, and he was asked to take off his shoes because he was standing on holy ground. The act of faith occurred in the heart before the action of taking off the shoes. In this story from Mark's Gospel, it's a story more than just healing. It's a story of faith. Faith exercised or faith put into action. The writer of Mark's Gospel, I think, is highlighting the need for deep faith. Faith that's not just in our heads or hearts, but also in our actions, in our living, and in our reaching out. If you want to do some homework later on, look at the previous story of what's going on before this story that John's going to read in a moment. The disciples were in a boat and a great storm comes up. The storm is battering the disciples in the boat. And they come to Jesus, help us, help us, help us. And Jesus says, or calms the storm and then says, why are you so afraid? O ye, or you of little faith. Where was Jesus? He was in the boat. Where is Jesus in this story that we're about to hear? He's in the crowd, in the middle, in the centre. Two people exercised their faith today. Two people acted and reached out. Both could have stayed home where it's nice and warm. You could have all stayed home this morning, but you're here. In the middle of this story, you'll hear the words, I think, of the gospel message. Daughter, or son, if you want to replace it, your faith has made you well. It takes faith to reach out. To reach out to Jesus in your own way, in your own need, is both physical and spiritual. To receive new life and well-being in some form. We might be in this story. Which character might you be? Or which sits for you? And I'll be asking some questions after, so take note. Are you one of the crowd? Are you Jairus? Are you the woman? Are you a disciple? Are you the girl? Are you one of the mourners? I'll be inviting feedback after John shares with us this great reading. Big ask, isn't it? Thanks, John.
When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding around you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what was said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, and at this they were completely astonished. This is the word of the Lord.
It takes faith to reach out. Was the crowd trying to hide Jesus? Restrict Jesus? The woman? What about the disciples? Jairus' faith. The woman's passion. All recorded in the Gospels for us a long time ago. For us to be encouraged to reach out in faith. What stands out in society and life these days? Is it the powerful? Is it the noisy? Is it the big and the strong and the loud? Most times. But what about the confident, small, ordinary lives, such as the woman? Both come to Jesus, and both find new life and new beginnings. For Jesus embraces both.